Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football Dill, Oregon. Heading into 2025, the national media has their question marks about this Oregon team. Now, look, I get it. If you were a casual college football fan, you look at this Oregon football team going into 2025, just on the surface, you're saying, hey, you lose a lot of production, a lot of really good football players going to the NFL draft. Dill, Oregon is sitting here going into 2025, 109th in returning production across the country. Now, yes, on the surface, you might have some question marks about that. I think to a lot of Oregon fans who live and breathe this program, who follow this program, know this roster pretty damn well, there's that quiet optimism that this Oregon team in 2025 might be better than the team that we saw in 2024. Now, I think some of y'all are asking, hey, how can you possibly make that claim with all the talent you are losing? Dill, this is what happens when you stack routinely top 5 classes in the country. You supplement it really well in the transfer portal. Yeah, this roster has less known commodities than it did 12 months ago in spring practice, but the talent level, the potential of what this Oregon team could be, I think is unarguably it's higher. The ceiling's higher for this team going into 2025. Now, will this team be as good as they were in 2024? That's the conversation I want to get into before we do. And as always, the Oregon fans, let it fly in the comment section. Look, there's a lot of different ways you can look at this football team going into the 2025 year. And I'm guessing that from what we're going to hear from the Oregon fans, y'all probably are kind of the way I am with this Oregon team. That is quiet confidence that this team could be really damn good in the 2025 year. Appreciate you guys. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Dill, I'm fired up for this one. We are going to go old-fashioned style, position group by position group, kind of stacking this Oregon team going into 2025 versus what they were in 2024. Let's start at the top, quarterback position. Now, it's quarterback battle. I think many of us assume Dante Moore is going to win this job, be the starting quarterback in 2025. I think this take is pretty obvious, right? Dillon Gabriel, you kind of knew what you were going to get, right? He was a 6-year senior that was extremely productive. You knew what he was good at. You knew what he wasn't good at. What excites me the most about Dante Moore is that the ceiling with this Oregon offense with Dante Moore at the helm is, in my opinion, infinitely higher than it was with Dillon Gabriel. How do you stack Dante Moore and Dillon Gabriel going into 2025?
Now, there might not be a bigger Dante Moore fan than me. I think you like Dante Moore. I think I like him quite a bit more than you. I am very willing to overlook some of the mistakes that he made as a freshman because, again, we've talked about it. UCLA was horrible around him. Their offensive line, horrible. Run game, not particularly great. Wide receiver play, aside from Sturdivant, pretty weak for the most part.
Yeah, but you're saying, aside from J. Michael Sturdivant, J. Michael Sturdivant, I don't think would play for this Oregon wide receiver in 2025.
In that fair take, because that's probably where I'll disagree with you a little bit about what the skill positions are for Oregon. But I look at what Dante Moore did. I just think he got a bad deal. I think he's a really good. You saw the throws he makes, the high level throws, the ability to just do things that almost no one else can do. Now, the one question for Dante Moore is his athleticism maybe up another level, because that did feel like a bit of a liability. And I'm not saying he needs to go in there and be Michael Vick necessarily, but you got to be a serviceable athlete, I think, from that quarterback spot. That's going to be what I'm looking for. Has he developed as an athlete to where, again, he's not going to be a runner, but can he be a guy who at least can avoid some of the sacks that
and you can be a playmaker back there at quarterback, because that was one thing that both Bo Nix and Dillon Gabriel did quite well for Oregon, like get themselves out of trouble, get outside the pocket, throw off platform, extend plays. Can Dante Moore do that? And then I think secondly is the decision-making there as well. Because you go back to the UCLA film, there were a lot of throws where you were kind of scratching your head from the true freshman quarterback. And one of the things we loved about DG for the most part was, look, he didn't put the ball in harm's way all that often. What excites me the most is how it opens up the Oregon offense. You go back to the 2024 year, it was, look, this Oregon offense was really good, but there were just certain things they could not do with Dillon Gabriel. Over 60% of Dillon Gabriel's pass attempts were between the numbers, and only 10% were 20-plus yards down the field. Like, we weren't very comfortable pushing the ball down the field. We weren't very comfortable working the boundary with Dillon Gabriel at quarterback. With Dante Moore, you can ask him to make any throw on the football field because the arm talent, the arm strength is there in a big way. And just to round out this conversation, Dylan Gabriel, you knew what your floor was. You knew you were getting a dang solid quarterback that if you had the tools around him, he would be really good. That's what you got. Dante Moore, it might be a little bit more of a roller coaster. You're not as much sure what to expect, but the ceiling for him in this offense is higher than what it was for Dylan Gabriel. That's kind of where I sit. And Dill, I would caution a lot of again, I don't mean to say casual college football fans, but the college football fans around the country who just remember Dante Moore as a true freshman at UCLA and say it's a completely different ballpark
But
with him stepping
frankly,
into
I don't think
offense.
those people watched his games. Yeah, you look, the stats maybe were what they were, but again, you just see the
Some high low
talent he
throws.
had and what he was able to do. Like, there were some throws that not just some, pretty consistently, that just made your jaw drop. So that's where, again, I think people are really doing some stat watching. I think you're really underrating how bad that offensive line was, because it probably was one of the worst in the Pac-12 conference.
Oh yeah.
If you watch his games, I don't see how you could come away and be not kind of a fan.
And not to mention he was a true freshman. He was an 18-year-old kid. Now he's at a year to develop under a 6-year quarterback like Dylan Gabriel, has the same offensive coordinator in Will Stein. You're going to see him more comfortable in the offense too, which I think certainly matters. All right, this might get heated then. Offensive skill.
Yeah.
I guess I'll give you the T-box. So it sounds like you think.
No, I want you to answer my question first. Is this a better unit than it was last year? Let's just straight up start there, because I don't necessarily think so right on the surface.
Yeah, and I don't know if I'm going to get up here and say that as well, because I think Jordan James was an exceptional running back for Oregon. Although I think Mekhi Hughes, I don't think the drop-off is going to be all that significant. Replacing Tez Johnson is kind of what it is to me. Trayshawn Holden was solid, but I don't think that's like an irreplaceable guy. Tez Johnson was so freaking important to this Oregon offense. I think every Oregon fan understands that. I'll make the argument that it is. I'll give you the argument for it being better. Evan Stewart was underwhelming in 2024. I think to a lot, at least my expectations, I thought Evan Stewart was going to come to Oregon, ball out, go first round in the NFL draft. That's not what we got from him in 2024. Why to believe in Evan Stewart going into 2025? Dill, here's your answer. Dante Moore's a better quarterback for Evan Stewart. What does Evan Stewart do best? He works vertically down the field. He works well on the boundary. That just was not an ideal wide receiver. It wasn't an ideal quarterback, I should say, for a guy like Evan Stewart. I think Dante Moore is going to benefit Evan Stewart a lot. And then you look at DeCorian Moore. Look, he's a freshman, and I don't mean
he is probably the answer, right? He's probably the guy if you get what you want out of the skill position. I'm not a huge Gary Bryant fan, not a huge Justice Lowe fan. Those are solid kind of depth wide receiver pieces in my mind. They both can come in and maybe do some certain things. But in terms of all down pass catchers, I don't see it from them. Jurian Dickey and Kyle Casper, yeah, we know they have a lot of talent. You really haven't seen much from them either yet. It's probably deep enough in their career, if they were going to be elite number one kind of guys, they'd probably be making more inroads than I think they have. So that's kind of my issue.
I think you're skipping over DeCorian Moore in a big time way, because we just saw
he's kind of the hope. I think he's the hope.
Yeah, but I think that's realistic, though. I think DeCorian Moore is one of those cats that you can say, hey, he has the chance to be the wide receiver one of this offense. And Dill, here's what's special about DeCorian Moore. He can do it all. He can give you some of what Tez Johnson gave. He is elite after the catch. Very good short area quicks. Oh, yeah, he's also a 10-4 guy in the 100-meter dash and has exceptional ball skills working vertically down the field. We just saw Jeremiah Smith come in as a true freshman and absolutely ball out for Ohio State. We saw the same thing from Ryan Williams at Alabama. We saw the same thing from Cam Coleman at Auburn. Dill, in my opinion, I don't know if DeCorian Moore's Jeremiah Smith level, but I think he certainly is Ryan Williams level, and we saw Ryan Williams be a dog for Alabama. I don't think it's crazy to say that DeCorian Moore comes in is the wide receiver one for this offense, and then Evan Stewart is that wide receiver 1B. Then you sprinkle in maybe Jeremiah McClellan, guy that I'm super excited about.
Now look, if you get that from DeCorian Moore, I'm all aboard. I'm all aboard the Oregon offensive skill train, but that's a tall task, it feels like.
Yeah, but I think DeCorian Moore's that kind of guy. And then here's my last argument here. Kenny Sadiq only played 350 snaps. You knew it was coming. He only played 350 snaps for this Oregon offense. And this is not an I feel like some Oregon fans get it confused like I'm anti-Terrence Ferguson. No, not. I love Terrence Ferguson. I think Terrence Ferguson is going to have a great NFL career. Kenny Sadiq a little bit more juice than a guy like Terrence Ferguson.
And
He is
honestly, he's probably a better player for Dante Moore. Like, you look at the route tree, he kind of has access to his
that's a good
ability.
point.
And where Dante Moore, like the way he can thread balls into certain windows, like having that catch radius, having that athleticism, I do think he's probably a guy. I think Fitz maybe like Dylan Gabriel, more of a quick processor, be able to get the ball out. Terrence Ferguson, very, very smart or tight end, I should say, good at finding holes. Dante Moore, he's a little bit different. I mean, you want to just like, okay, go out, make big time throws to wide receivers who have good catch radiuses, can make contested catches, do all those things. Kenyon Sadiq, again, like, do we know exactly what his hands are yet in terms of like contested catch balls? I don't know that it's totally proven. I'm not saying it's not there or
Yeah.
like you don't believe it, but I do look like from just a pure play style, I think a much better fit for Dante Moore than
Yeah, and
probably
much better
two.
fit in this offense too, because Oregon is the yards after the catch offense. Like, it's no secret what Will Stein wants to do. We want to get our playmakers the ball in space and let them cook. No, Kenyon, I think, can be a freaking monster in the yards after the catch situation. That's a really big. He's up to 245 pounds. Was a 10-7 guy on the 100-meter coming out of high school. Again, the Oregon fans, y'all are probably going to get sick and tired of me talking about Kenyon Sadiq until the fall. I think he could be the best tight end in the country. And so I look at it and say, yes, you lose a really, really important piece in Tez Johnson, but you also have some guys emerging. You have some guys coming into the program that I think could replace some of that production you do lose. Offensive line. The interior offensive line gets better. Poncho just gets better going into year 3, one of the best centers in the country. Emmanuel Pregnon is an upgrade, and that's not a shot at guys like Marcus Harper, but Emmanuel Pregnon is just a legitimate upgrade from anyone they had at guard. The question is how good can these offensive tackles be? Isaiah World, Dill, I was listening to some, and I like going back and watching Isaiah World at the G5 level. He looks like an NFL dude, and I've heard people have the take that Isaiah World is farther along than Josh Connerly Jr. No, I don't necessarily. I'm not necessarily making that claim, but I've heard people think that way. Dill, if you get quality tackle play from Isaiah World and Alex Harkey, I'm not necessarily sure I'm going to get up here because I love the Johnny Cornelius too. I'm not going to get up here and say the offensive line's clearly better than it was in the 2024 year, but I also don't think it's going to be that step back that we might have expected it to take, early January when you were losing Josh Conley Jr. and a Johnny and you weren't really sure who was going to play tackle in the 2024.
And my question's probably what they do in pass pro, but I look at like what this line can be in terms of like physically being really, really tough. And Oregon was good. That was a good physical line last year. Like Alex Harkey, that's his game. Emmanuel Pregnon, that's his game. Like those are big physical offensive linemen. Again, I probably have some questions about Alex Harkey's athleticism and does it hold up in big time Power 4, I guess, competition.
Yep.
But I don't have any question about him being able to move guys off the ball. Emmanuel Pregnon, same thing. So at the very least, you're going to have a very physical offensive line that, frankly, fits probably pretty well with what Mekhi Hughes wants to do in terms of just being physically able to grind teams down a little bit.
That's a really good point that I didn't have in my notes. It probably is going to be probably a little bit better of a run blocking unit than what we saw the last couple
of years.
It
was a great run. It was a really good run blocking unit last year. I just look like what they brought in. Those are physical kind of maulers more so than like finesse pass pro guys.
All right. Here's the biggest storyline for the Oregon team in 2020, in my opinion. When you talk about like, all right, we know this is a college football playoff caliber team. That's not the goal for Oregon. Like, it's not the goal is a national championship every single year till Dan Lanning retires. Dan Lanning leaves. Is the defensive line national championship caliber? It was good last year. I don't know if it was national championship caliber. Here's what kind of popped up into my mind as I was kind of working through this. It was a very, very good unit against average offensive lines. When they played good offensive lines, I didn't feel like it took over games the way it needed to, specifically late in the season. I mean, Penn State ran the football for 297 yards, averaged nearly 9 yards per carry. You only had 1 sack and 2 TFLs forced. Then the Rose Bowl against Ohio State gave up 181 rushing yards, 0 sacks, only 3 tackles for a loss. This was a good defensive line. When it played some of the better offensive line units in the country, it didn't take over games the way you wanted. Can it do that in 2025?
And it
That's
just
my
wasn't
question to
deep
you.
enough. That was my biggest
I
issue is
agree.
you just
That's what
had
I have.
asked way too much out of those defensive tackles. Harmon and Caldwell were on the field, it felt like,
So
pretty much
much.
for entire games, and that's way
It was
too
in
much.
Amari
And
Washington. It was those three. It was like Harmon,
but
Caldwell, and
even
Amari
like Amari
Washington.
Washington was playing a lot, but it was really those two. Like when that Penn State game was going, it felt like Caldwell and Harmon really got worn down in that football game. Now, this is where Dan Lanning's got his shot to shut a lot of people up. He's now recruit. He's got a lot of talent in this defensive line room. Aiden Breland, Tyon Gray, Jericho Johnson. Like, he's got to get 4 or 5 of those guys playing. They need a rotation that they have probably 5 to 6 deep. It wasn't the case last year because they really only had 3. Now we'll see. Is Dan Lanning in this Oregon program developing defensive linemen at the level, let's say, Georgia was when Georgia's kind of really rolling college ball? Like, that's what you're looking for.
And you've seen the steps. Mateo U, Tatum are two of the most underrated edge defenders
The
that
edge
you
play
see.
is going to be awesome this year,
I
I
think
think.
low-key Amari Washington is one of the more underrated interior defensive linemen that you see in the country too. What are they?
I shouldn't have said that like I was implying that the development's not happening. Like those guys were ultra young. What were they? True freshmen last year? Like again, you just need to see it, and they're recruiting the right way that they need to have kind of that pipeline where you're just going to be deep every year. They're retaining guys at a high level. I'm excited to see it because I do think it can take a step. And again, maybe the top line talent. Again, that probably depends on how good a guy like Aiden Breland is, what their top line talent
Well, we
is.
haven't even mentioned who I think has that, like Bear Alexander, Dill. And I
They
know you're
haven't
not
even.
as much of. I know you are not as much of a Bear Alexander believer as I am. I'll say 2 things. One, you are hearing all the right things from this kid as he's gotten into Oregon. And I was very vocal when Bear Alexander came to Oregon. Is like, look, this is a perfect fit. Like Dan Lanning and Oregon have an elite culture where you want to add a guy like Bear Alexander, and if you can get the best out of him, they'll go back and look at the 20 best plays from Bear Alexander in that 2023 year as a redshirt freshman at USC. They were game-wrecking elite. Now, can you get those 20-plus plays more consistently in the 2025 season for Oregon? If you get that, like I think Bear Alexander and Derek Carmen kind of just like an inner. And I know I'm setting the standard high because Derek Carmen was that guy for Oregon. I think Bear Alexander can be that guy. You know, the most important thing though, the depth and the ceiling of this Oregon defensive lines largely lies into the year 2 guys: Aiden Breland, Jericho Johnson, Tyon Gray, Elijah Rushing. Do these year 2 guys that Oregon really pushed their chips in to go get in that 2024 class, can they emerge as difference makers, or at least guys that can play significant amounts of snaps for you in 2025? That's kind of where it sits.
Well, see,
But
I think
it's
especially on the inside, you probably need difference-making play from 1 or 2 of them.
yeah,
Because like Elijah Rushing doesn't necessarily need to be an absolute killer next year. Because I think Mateo U, I really like how he's coming along. Tatum Tuioti, huge fan of him. Even Blake Purchase, like I imagine we'll see more of him this year. Excited to see what he can do. So I think you have your, let's say, your star power at the edge spot. I do look on the inside. That's from what, like, how do they replace Harmon? Because Harmon was a monster last year, and they need
But
someone
I
to be.
think you made a really good point. Yes, you're looking for difference makers, but it's deeper too. And that why I just listed the 2 games Oregon's defensive line really struggled in. Dill, I don't think it's a coincidence that those were the 2 games where the offenses were not on the field as much and late in the season, where your guys are probably worn down a little bit. It's a deeper unit that's going to help you win football games in December and January. Linebacker room. You lose Jeff Bossa. Ideally, to me, it's Devin Jackson. Like this Devin Jackson, who got better in 2024. Does he take a step in 2025? We need more speed at this position. Devin Jackson gives you that speed. Can we go run and chase guys from Ohio State, Texas at that linebacker spot? Here's my last
Because
hot take.
I'm with you. I have loved the development in that linebacker room. I think you've seen really good progression from him and Betcher. Jackson and Betcher, I feel like there were games where they were playing at a level. It's like, oh, this is a little bit more reminiscent of what like Georgia linebackers look like when Dan Lanning was coaching them there. I think they are really on the right track at the linebacker spot. That's when I'm like really excited for. Might be way better in my mind.
I hope it is, because I do think that they need a little bit more juice from the linebacker room. Here's the hot take I have: secondary bet better, and it might be Dale the most improved unit on this football team. Now, that might be a hot take because, I mean, you do lose a guy like Jabbar Muhammad, Dante Manning. You lose some good football players. You have to replace both safeties. I'll take you down what I'm thinking here. The safety position you are infinitely better at, in my opinion. You know, Kobe Savage and Tasheem Johnson were solid. They were not national championship caliber safeties. Kobe
And
Savage.
I'm not like trying to disrespect Kansas State, but they were like Kansas State starters. That's kind of what I felt like they were getting from that safety room. I don't think that's like when Oregon gets into like the peak Dan Lanning years. That's not what your safety is. Lever, I don't think look
Yeah,
like.
I mean Dylan, at times they were liabilities. Like in the Ohio State game,
When you
they
saw really athletic
was
wideout rooms come against them, yeah, they
yeah,
just looked
it
too
was
slow.
a
They were a step
problem,
behind.
especially when they were asked to run with some of these guys. Dylan Tiemann comes in is by far the best safety on this team. He's a arguably top 50 pick in next year's
He's
NFL
amazing.
draft. So we know he's an upgrade, unquestionably, because you've seen it from him the last 2 years at Purdue. And then look, you got 4 names: Kingston Lopa, Peyton Woodard, Aaron Flowers, Trey McNutt. They're all young guys, either going into their redshirt freshman years or true freshman years. In Trey McNutt's case, they're all 4 of them are just better fits and athletes than what you had from your safety position last year. I only need 1 or 2 of them to step up and be those guys. I feel pretty good that they will be. Then you look at the cornerback spot and say, I mean, it's blue chip city here. I mean, I think you have a chance to see Naheem Offer get on the football field. Brandon Finney, nobody talks about him because you have a guy like Naheem Offer. Brandon Finney is extremely, extremely good football player. And then Ife Obadegu, and you got a guy like Roderick Pleasant. To me, I look at it and say, okay, we haven't seen a ton of football from these guys because they are young, but there's
There's the
so
type of
much
players you
talent.
want.
There's so much talent and there's so much competitive depth that Utah, whoever wins your boundary cornerback, like I just gave you my best shot at what the depth chart's going to look like. Whoever wins that job, I know is going to be a good football player because they're beating out a lot of other good football players too. I think the secondary, that's probably if you were optimistic about 2 things for Oregon, it's Dante Moore elevating the offense, and it's the secondary being better equipped athletically to deal with a team like Ohio State, where last year they probably just weren't big and fast enough. We'll close it out there. Well, actually, Dill, here's the I guess we just worked through the whole roster. Do you think this team is better in 2025 than it was in 2024?
I think it'll stay kind of leveled. And I think their
How about
ceiling will be
answer?
better. I think they'll be better competitive against the top teams because I look, the Dan Lanning talent is starting to filter through this roster. But I look, there are some certainly positions like are they going to be as clean on the offense side of the ball just in general? That's probably where I wonder. Like game in, game out, are you like they really only had, I feel like, one poor performance on offense, and that was against Wisconsin. Probably you could say Ohio State in that game as well, but just nothing was working that day. I think they'll have a better shot to win a national title because I think, again, their top end at the spots that they were really deficient, like safety, it's a lot better. I do
Their
feel like,
ceiling is higher as a football team. There's no question about it. And
but
Dill,
I'm not sure they'll be as much of a machine as they were last year. I think maybe you'll have more ups and downs. That's kind of what I'm guessing.
yeah, but even if you're down, like you can play down against Northwestern on the road.
No,
You'll
and
be
then
all
I'd
right.
rather have like a
Yeah.
team that can
Yeah, I
legitimately
think
win a
if you're an
national
Oregon
title.
fan, you probably take like, hey, I want as high of a ceiling as possible. That's how you win national championships. And then you like Ohio State. Ohio State was a little bit of a roller coaster, but they had a super high ceiling. We knew they had a high ceiling all year. Then they played like their ceiling in the college football playoffs and went and kind of walked into a national championship. Here's the last thing is you got 4 very comfortable games to start. It's not like you're opening up with some juggernauts. You go on the road at Penn State late in September, but you open up Montana State at home, Okie State at home, at Northwestern, Oregon State. Those are 4 games that they're not cupcakes, but they're games that you should win, and you can kind of iron out some of the new faces in this lineup. And then you got to go play your best football on the road at Penn State. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. My answer, I think they certainly can be a better team in 2025. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.